In the social sciences, you hear the term culture kicked around a lot. What is culture, anyway? How is it useful? Human geographers and other social scientists generally agree on a definition of culture as the patterns of learned behavior in a society which help distinguish that society from other groups. So, if we observe a group of people who live together for a while, we should begin to see that some of their behaviors are similar. We may hear the same general types of music, see that most people identify and find certain common types of foods which are preferred and prepared in the same way. We see people dressed in similar clothing styles. We hear them communicating in a generally common language. We may discern common beliefs about life and death and see that they recognize common deities and pray to those deities in a similar manner. They may also organize their families in a similar family structure. These and other shared, learned behaviors are what make up the culture of a society. When enough of these cultural traits are shared by a group of people, it makes them an identifiable tribe, society, or a country. For just a minute or two, I'm going to ask you to be a social scientist and take a little quiz. Listen to the following 3 examples of music and try to figure out which selection, first, second, or third, best represents the Turkish culture. Okay, social scientist, which did you choose, first, second, or third? If you chose all of the above, you are correct. It was a trick question. They are all part of Turkish music culture. Even the third selection, which sounds almost country western to our ears, was Turkish music. In this podcast, we will be visiting the country of Turkey. However, our focus will be on a few parts of the Turkish culture. Dan has visited Turkey over 20 times since 1970. Dan is a master teacher who retired from Spring Lake Park Schools. Dan also taught in the North Suburban Summer Academy program in the metropolitan Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And he holds a master's degree in curriculum instruction. You are listening to a podcast created by the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education, and our mission is to help you understand your world better through geography. Several Minnesota geography standards are addressed by this podcast, and we focus on the 8th and 9th grade students in this podcast, but it's also good for anyone interested in the country of Turkey. I'm Fred Kunze, a member of the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. Dan, culture is a set of learned behaviors we can study, and it makes a group of people different from the surrounding group because they share a lot of those main cultural traits. And one of those is, of course, language, one of the most important ones. Now, you know a little bit of Turkish, and you're willing to share some phrases with us and say what they mean in English. Can you do some of those for us?
Yes. I used hoş geldiniz earlier, and it's kind of interesting how, in Turkish, they'll have a different term for each person. So the person that's, one person might say hoş geldiniz, and the other person will say hoş bulduk. So it's kind of a welcome interchange. The word for hello is one of the ways of saying hello is actually similar to a lot of Arabic countries, which is merhaba. In the morning, you'll get up, and if you want to say good morning or good day, it's günaydin. And when you want to go to leave or say good night, it's iyi geceler. İyi means good, and geceler means nights. Thank you is teşekkür ederim. And if you just want to say a short version like thanks, you can get away with just teşekkür. And if you meet someone new, you can say tanıştığımıza memnun oldum. And they also have an interesting interchange for leaving a place. So if you're leaving someone's house at the end of a day, you will say Allah'a ısmarladık. And then the person who's staying there will say güle güle. So the two different ways of saying goodbye, depending on whether you're the person leaving or staying.
And güle güle is what would that? Is there an English equivalent to that? Kind of a nice sounding güle güle.
Güle güle. Well, another way that it's used is really one of my favorite expressions. So if someone is buying something nice, and the person who's with them will say güle güle kolan, which means use it with a smile. And I've always thought that's kind of a nice expression that they have for wishing someone well when they get something new.
That's okay. That's a smattering of what the language is like. If you were to hear some of those phrases on the street over there, let's look at some other aspects of culture now. Another major aspect of culture is the religious makeup of a country. And can you break that down a little bit for us? And as far as the religious consistency of Turkey.
Well, almost all the people in Turkey, over 99%, are of the Muslim faith.
So when you're talking about mosques and that's always connected to Muslims, minuets, that's always connected to Muslims. Do you see any other religious buildings in Turkey at all? Or?
Well, because their history goes back to the Byzantium and Roman empires, they still have many churches that are old, and there are minorities of Christian groups that are still going to service there.
Okay. Another aspect of culture are the way people dress. Now, because of some of the famous paintings and poems and things like that, many of us have a certain stereotype about the way people dress in Turkey, and it's probably based on those paintings, that old with the men with the fez. Can you talk a little bit about that for us? Is that still true, and what was that like?
Well, a lot of those historical places, a museum or perhaps a performance festival will show, the man's hat called the fez, or women's dress with long skirts and decorative beads and things like that. A lot of those can be seen in painting or artwork of the Sultan times in Turkey. Most of the people that you'll see pass on the street are kind of typical Western casual style, as in Europe. And, perhaps some of the women in kind of traditional Muslim dress.
Are children required to wear uniforms in school, or do they dress any way they want?
I think I have seen a lot of uniforms at least in private schools.
Yeah. Okay, and then let's talk about food. I'm sure that you have some favorite foods or some typical Turkish food and that food is a major indicator of culture. We in the United States are such a melting pot of foods from all over the country. But are there some foods, especially ones you like, that are more typical of the Turkish cuisine?
Most of the people who I know who have visited Turkey have raved about the food. There's many unique dishes. The doner kebab, which is like the Greek gyros, is popular as kind of a fast food. They also have shish kebab, which is, can include grilled lamb, chunks of meat. The dolmas are very popular. I like the grape leaves stuffed with rice, pine nuts, and sometimes meat. And they also have delicious bread there. It comes with every meal. And the Turkish word for bread is ekmek. And it's very good.
Well, you're making me hungry, and I'd just love to have some of those tastes right now. But I think we have a flavor, if you'll pardon the pun, for a little bit about Turkish culture, and I sure appreciate you sharing your time and your expertise with Mage students and others who will be listening to this podcast. Thank you very much, Dan.
İyi şanslar, iyi günler.
Which means?
Good luck and good days.
Thank you, and good luck and good days to you. You have been listening to a production of the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. Background music is courtesy of Jim Hogue of Decorah, Iowa. The Minnesota Alliance is a non-profit group of educators and other parties who are interested in promoting an enhanced understanding of our world through improved geographic literacy.